All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Fairway Performance Podcast. Today we have a special guest on all the way from America, or he's probably from the majority of a place where I'm going to get the majority of the guests for this show. We were just talking about it before, Australia being a very small island and probably 1/15 of a population to America. So you're going to hear a lot more guests from over this part of the world. But Luke Benoit, I pronounced that right, didn't I?
You know
Benoit.
that.
Yeah, and Luke and I connected via Instagram because he runs a really cool Instagram page, which I have actually enjoyed following lately and getting plenty of swing tips and whatnot from. But he also owns a product called the Rypstick, which I'm sure we'll get into today. And for anyone that's followed me and is following my programs and stuff online, they know that speed training is a very big part of what I do, as well as the strength and conditioning that we do. We also have a lot of speed training work in there. But yeah, today I just wanted to get Luke on to talk about, firstly learn about his story and then talk about some speed training and we'll go from there. So did you want to say a quick hello, Luke, and just give us a bit of a background from, how you got into golf and sort of how it led you to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, guys. So my background, I really started out as a multi-sport athlete and started golfing when I was around 13. So I was a little older than a lot of people that turned professional. But as soon as I got into it, I was hooked. I was a 200 rounds a year guy for about 3 years. And I had no lessons as a kid. So my grandpa taught me a couple things. And he was big on making sure you could curve it left and curve it right. And he said, if you can curve it both ways, you spend the rest of your life learning how to hit it straight. So I was a ball flight. I loved to curve it around the golf course. I didn't really understand how terrible my swing plane was. I was really steep as a kid, but I could move it really well both ways. And as I got older, I started getting into some video and figuring out my swing. And it took me probably 2.5 years to break par. So from the time I got in, I was just totally hooked and playing all the time. But I did it with a lot of short game and wedges, and irons were decent, but the driver was always kind of crooked because I was so steep. So I ended up playing Division III golf, Gustavus Adolphus in St. Peter, Minnesota, and then played a couple of years of mini tour golf, which was really a great experience. Anybody that has a chance to play professionally, I think, should give it a shot. And I knew the whole time that I'd probably end up being a teacher because I was so analytical. Like we're always kind of defined by our environment. Well, my environment was no golf lessons, but a brain that was very analytical about how to figure it all out. So recovering from a very steep plane, and I played college golf 4 degrees upright, and then learning how to flatten my swing out and work on it. And, that was a fun process for me. I feel like had I had an earlier start with some good instruction, might have been a much better player. But, hindsight's 50, hindsight's up. So anyway, that's my background. And then I got into coaching. I knew I'd be a teaching pro, coached college golf, did some education. I've got a PhD in motor learning, so that's kind of my background. And I'm just all about, my goal was always I want to be the best teaching pro I can possibly be. And I thought biomechanics and motor learning would be the best chance to get there.
Yeah, awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the motor learning. I know it's a very massive subject, but it's obviously something that's very relevant to golf and learning a fine motor skill like golf, or a very complex motor skill like golf. Tell me a little bit more about the coursework and what you sort of learned during that and how it's tied into your work now.
Yeah, so I got into the PGA and I was going through the PGA education, and quite frankly, I didn't realize that I didn't feel like the PGA prepared me very well for teaching, and I was like, what's missing here? Because I get in front of a student, I don't even know the best drills to help them learn. I know how to, fuel a golf cart, but I don't know how to teach them how to learn a golf swing. So I said, well, what's the most important discipline for this? And it came down to 3 choices. I could do motor learning, biomechanics, or I could do psychology, because I figured those would be the 3 most important parts for teaching golf. And at the time, I didn't even think about, the physiology and the strength and the fitness. I, kind of figured that was probably going to be somebody else's department, somebody like you, Sean. But what I realized is motor learning is probably the most important, because if we can take care of the body, put that in a good spot, and then we teach them the motor skills the most efficient way, we have the best chance of getting fast results. So that's kind of why I went that direction.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to, I've got a few questions lined up and I'd like to dive further into that. And then, so obviously now you're a golf coach, and you've been doing that for a number of years, and you founded this product called the Rypstick, which is what sort of got us connected. What sort of led you towards creating a training aid like the Rypstick, or a swing speed training aid like the Rypstick? Like what came up that made you want to go down that path?
Yeah, it came out because I was coaching a lot of elite juniors in the area, and these elite juniors, we have this huge winter season in Minnesota. You guys are maybe not familiar with the six month off season, but here we are. It's mid to late October, and we're shutting it down. It's going to start snowing soon. We have until March 1st, so we have this big window where we work on mechanics and we work on speed and strength. And so I would start getting my kids on super speed because it really works, right? And as I realized this is a great product, I was like, but my kids don't want to carry 3 sticks around. So there's an obvious sort of like make a better mousetrap opportunity here. And that's what I did. Is I was like, I'm going to make a better version of super speed. And then I'm really interested in biomechanics and really the skill development part of it as well. And so it made a great pandemic project. A pandemic hit us all pretty hard. And I was like, boy, I got some downtime here. And that's when I started Rypstick. And honestly, I didn't expect it to be as successful as we've been. We're growing quickly. We're growing 100% a year. And it's been kind of a fun thing to get involved in. And so many different parts to it. It keeps your brain fresh. It's fun to teach golf and then go work Rypstick on the side.
Yeah, that's the reason that I've loved it, because when I think it was you that reached out to me initially and said, hey, I see you using a super speed golf stuff. Why don't you try this? And I was like, I see the benefit of using swing speed training aid first and foremost. Like I'm always going to use one or them, and then for you to have it where it's literally just 3-in-1, where instead of carrying the 3 sticks around, I could just carry the one around. I did a recent trip to Bali, and instead of having 3 sticks in my bag, I just had had the weights in there and just stuck it in. It's a perfect warm up tool. Perfect to keep my swing speed training going while I was over there. Not that I really did that much. I only got to do a couple of sessions because I was training predominantly, but and playing. Actually, I played a lot of rounds. But it's super handy. That's the reason that I love it over all the other tools that I've used so far. Thanks again for sending that out and letting me have a test of it. It's been super helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what we're seeing, especially for competitive players. If they're traveling at all, it's a win for sure. Yeah,
definitely. And so with that, obviously you said that it started during the pandemic, but how many golfers have you actually got from tour players? Have you got working with you or high level amateurs or whatever working with you currently?
I mean, we've got honestly over 85 tour pros, and it's such an easy sell to convert them over if they've used super speed. So, there's always that advantage. Any caddy's going to want to switch over. And then honestly, we've had some really good luck with guys like Phil Mickelson. He's warming up with it at live golf events, and Ian Poulter is warming up with it at a Ryder Cup. And so if you go on a PGA Tour range, somebody's going to have it out and use it. And so we have guys picking it up, and especially the guys that are on the slower side, they really, really need it, and they're going to just make that part of their routine. So we're at a point where we don't have name and likeness with all these guys, but there is a lot of them out there, and they like our product. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it does have a very unique sound when you swing it also. The whooshing or the whatever that sound is. It's if you're listening to this, have a crack at it, or maybe there's some videos that I put on Instagram where you can probably hear the video of it or hear the audio from it. Cool. Now, obviously you've dived into speed training and wanting to work on strength and speed during the winter season, and of course we don't have that in Australia. We've just gone through winter where I think the lowest temperature was 8 degrees, which is I think about 40 degrees for you guys, 40 Fahrenheit. So it's well above zero. And so, we don't experience that. So it's very hard in Australia to get people to commit to a program because they're just playing year round. So there's no off season, on season. So we face different challenges to you in terms of getting golfers to want to commit to a program for a period of time. But what do you find the average golfers need to do to get started with speed work, or like what's a great start point for them to get into it?
Right. So, first and foremost, like, I'm a PGA pro and I don't want people to get injured. So if somebody has a bad back and they haven't been working out for a long time, is training the right choice? No, I'd want to send them to you, Sean. You know what I mean? But for a
Yeah.
lot of people that are fairly healthy, they can jump right into speed training, and I'd always recommend find a fitness pro and work on both sides of it, because the stronger you are, the more effective it is, and you reduce your chance of injury. But, we've sold several thousand, if not 10,000 of Rypsticks already. And we've had pretty few number of emails about injuries. And a lot of it is just knowing that swinging a golf club is not dangerous unless you overdo it a crazy amount, or if you have body imbalances or tightness or, injury concerns with particular body parts. So, yeah, I think for most people, it's a great way to pick up 20 yards. And we've done a lot of research on it. Like, 20 yards is like pretty standard for 2 to 3 months of training for most people. So it's pretty quick to act, and there's diminishing returns after that, as with anything. But even so, if you keep it up for a long period of time, you'll still ratchet up your speed. And we've done a lot of cool research on that. If you want to, talk more about that, I can definitely do that.
Yeah, cool. It's I love what you said there about obviously seeing a fitness professional first. Obviously that's a good start point, but the little sort of pyramid that I like to work on, just with general golf fitness and general golf training, is first and foremost is mobility. So we need to have range of motion that exceeds the demands of the golf swing, is first and foremost, because then when we perform a golf swing, we're not going to injure ourselves because we're moving with dynamic. There's a lot of speed to it. For some people, more speed than others. If you're swinging 80 miles versus 120, a little bit different forces there, but still, it's your body whether it can handle it. Then once we've got that mobility or range of motion, it's then developing strength through the full range of motion. So doing, mobility drills that are resisted. So using a tool like a what's that strap or a band to resist, the range of motion the whole way, or doing something like a squat, a deadlift, or a press. A full range of motion squat, deadlift, or bench is we're taking our joints and muscles through their full range and building strength through that full range. And then starting to work on speed and power. And the way that I get people to understand that is, if you have a fighter who is a 150-pound fighter, a lightweight or lightweight-ish, his punch is going to be significantly less powerful than someone who's a 225-pound athlete. The 225-pound guy like Mike Tyson, if he went and fought Floyd and punched him in the face, I reckon it would knock Floyd out pretty fast, versus the other way around, So that's... Yeah, if we've got the underlying mobility, we've got really good strength through that range, and we've got increased muscle size, then our potential to produce more force is greater. So that's the way that I'll describe it through there. Now, what do you see as what you're saying there as what golfers do wrong? Where does this often go wrong? Like, what are the things that you see, or what are some red flags for people when they do get started to go, hey, like maybe I shouldn't go straight into doing speed work. I maybe should go see the fitness professional. Like, what are some red flags or alerts for people to pick up?
Yeah, I think pain is your ultimate, right? If you're hurt, go find a fitness pro for sure. And I would say if you're struggling with direction, immediately go find a golf pro, right? But for most people, I think jumping into it is a good idea, but I always supplement with fitness just to make you stronger and to supplement that. So we've done some cool research on, and I'm sure you're familiar with TPIs like power tests. And so they've got the vertical jump, the med ball toss, chest pass, and overhead pass. And so we created an algorithm using those and measuring those. I've got a couple hundred in our database, and it's qualified enough where, like you said, if people are strong, you're going to see a club head speed correlation that's really high. And so it's a kind of a 90% correlation. And then you find people that are swing faster than what you predict based on their strength, and some people that swing slower based on their strength. And the people that swing slower, one of two things: they have poor mobility, to your point, which is an injury concern. And those people probably honestly need to go see somebody like you immediately. Or people that are faster than what you'd predict, they have a great sequence, but you still want to make them stronger, because they probably need support to make sure that they don't go beyond the range, right? But what we find is the people that are below the predicted value in terms of speed, they'll pick up crazy amounts of speed if they do have decent mobility. It means their sequence is terrible. And so, like, I had this guy that's a track guy. Like, he did track in college. He comes in and he's swinging right around 92 miles an hour. And I'm like, Chad, I know you're faster than this. You look way stronger than this. We do the power test. I'm like, you should probably swing at, 122. So he goes from 92 miles an hour to 122, 30 miles per hour, which is almost 100 yards. And he does that in 4 months.
Wow.
And the power of the prediction of the algorithm. If you know how strong somebody is and you know how good their sequence is or how bad their sequence is, you can predict some amazing things. So that's the fun part of what we do. And I don't think anybody else is using that or doing that.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of people would have heard, ad nauseum from me as to how they can increase their body's potential of increasing their power, etc. If it was so that's one way. If it was the sequence, what are some things to look at there or to work on there if your sequence is out?
Yeah, so if the sequence is off, I mean, a good teaching pro can see some of it, but when you've spent a long time looking at a 2D swing or a 3D swing, you can see is the power coming from the ground, and are they using the vertical force, pushing up and twisting at the right time? Are they shifting to the front foot at the right time, which is kind of your linear force? And then are they rotating and getting that weight with that? Basically, are they twisting the hips is the best way to see that. And if you're utilizing all three of those forces, you're probably doing a pretty good job of maximizing the force you can create. And if you're not, that's where we come in and say, all right, well, let's hit one of these weaknesses, or let's just work on speed. And there's lots of different ways to swing it hard. There's lots of guys that jump out of their shoes, but we'd rather have a little bit more balanced approach to it. So that's where we kind of find the weakness. And that's where we see the best gains often.
Yeah. When you're talking about weakness, you'll see either the driving into the ground as the weakest part, or their rotation or ability to rotate dynamically is a limitation, and you're attacking one of those parts of the body. Yeah.
Yep, and it may be tied to a physical limitation, a mobility issue, as you point out, or it may be just a motor learning pattern, and they've never learned to do it, right? And so, like, if you think about like the average NBA player, if they're 6'8" and they can jump 40 inches. We got the vertical covered, we got leverage covered. And once you teach them to rotate a little bit and jump, they could probably almost all hit at 380 yards. They're going to smoke it, right? So it's just a prediction and then finding the weakness. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I just lost you there.
Yeah. All right, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So you were just saying, like, if you can teach them to rotate and jump, then obviously they're going to hit it a lot further.
Smash it. I mean, the average NBA player probably should hit 350 or 380, right? If with the right sequence training, they're great candidates. Absolutely smash them. Do long drive golf if they want to. Yeah,
well, Steph Curry is probably one of my favorite players currently, and he hits an absolute bomb, that guy. So. And he's he looks like a little kid compared to the other guys on the court. So he's only 6'3", just taller than me, and he hits big bombs. So
exactly, yeah.
Cool. Now, diving into the motor learning stuff. Now, what are so essentially, like, how does motor learning and what's the whole concept behind motor learning, and how does it help us get better with a golf swing? I know that's a massively, broad subject, and I'm sure you've talked about it before, but is there a simple way that you can explain this to people, and a way in which you can explain it, in which people can, take it to the range and start utilizing it and practicing it?
Right. I think I'll kind of start with, like, the most common myth is, like, you own your setup and you just go hit balls. Like, let's say you have a good grip, stance, and alignment, and you go hit balls, that good things are going to happen. I don't think that's necessarily the case. You're going to find some people find a pattern that's really dysfunctional. They might use their upper body way too early. Their sequence is out of whack, right? Versus using the ground. And so the way I would use motor learning and how to train somebody to swing properly is I would essentially train them from a top-down or a freezer position. So I get them feet together. I get them halfway back in their backswing, so their lead arm is straight and their wrists are cocked. The club is on plane. And then we'd step to the target and swish the club as hard as we can. And so if you start with linear force, and then you're going to certainly have some rotation and then a little bit of vertical force, that's a great way to learn how to swing. And if you imagine you gave a whole bunch of beginners, because I was lucky enough to teach golf at the University of Minnesota, all these beginner golfers. And so I had 600 beginner golfers over a series of 5 years. And in this sample, I did all the testing I could on them. And what I found is if I started for the first 2 weeks, they hit no golf balls. All we did was train a good sequence. And these kids are like, when do I get hit a ball? And I was like, just wait. But, you know, they needed
a hard sell.
Yeah, they needed the class for credit, right? So that was the advantage I had, is I had them just work on their swing, and they all learned how to step with their legs and sequence properly. As soon as I got a golf ball in front of them, they smashed it. They had not great direction. I mean, initially, we had some cleanup on path, but they could all swing hard. And then what I would say is, do you want to build a golf swing around a good sequence and the potential to be good? Or do you want to build around the idea of just hit the ball with your arms and hands and never learn to use your legs? Because you're going to build around maybe a faulty model and get some pretty challenging things later on if you start that way. So that's kind of how I'd approach a beginner, which is not traditional, but that's how I like to teach.
Yeah, cool. So that's teaching a lot of things. Did you want to go into like what it's actually teaching when you do that step? Like it's obviously teaching like linear force, like you're saying, so stepping forwards, but it's teaching planting on the lead foot, which then provides a better base of support, which allows for more rotation and torque. So I don't want to like take it all, but you continue.
That's exactly it. You're teaching them the linear, the rotation. You're teaching them, and we use a lot of pool noodles to make sure their plane was in a reasonable spot. So everybody'd have a pool noodle in the golf bag. And you're just teaching them how to create speed first, and then we take care of direction later by putting it on a tee and using a 7-iron and talking about, you know, what do we need to do with the grip and the flexion of the wrist, and all that stuff comes as next steps. But first, creating speed and power because they need it. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and there's lots of stuff. Have you looked much into Mark Brody's work with Every Shot Counts?
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I love it. It's part of the reason I got into speed training initially was when I read that. So,
right. And I go back to my own game. Like I was wild off the tee. I was probably hitting 40% of my fairways as a mini tour player. I wasn't very accurate, but you know, honestly, I wouldn't have given up 20 yards to hit 55%. You know?
Yeah.
Hitting it a little farther just makes the game so much easier. And so now you're seeing Scott Fawcett and all the people that are advocating for more speed and distance. And it's so true, right? With junior golfers, you see it all day. I'm sure, Sean. The longer ones have more potential.
Yeah, well, I mean, the percentages don't lie. You know, all the stats that Mark Brody breaks it down into. If you're an analytical person, or you know, you're someone who is very driven by numbers and analytics and data, then read that book, and it's like case in point. Just says the closer you are to the green, or the further you hit off the tee and closer to the green you are, the more chance you have at chipping it or, you know, wedging it closer to the hole. And then the closer you are to the hole, the more percentage of those putts you make. And it's, you know, it's plain as day. Not to mention all the data that comes out about, you know, the top 10, 20, 50 players in the world. They're all, you know, almost all leaders in driving distance, or they're all in the top 100 for driving distance, and they're all making, you know, top $50, $100, you know. So it's,
you look at the guys that straight, and there's almost no advantage to hitting it straight off the tee, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you break it down, a lot of those guys that are straight are at the bottom of the money list, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, Luke Donald. He was the best putter in the world, but he got to number one for a little while, but you don't really hear his name now. Whereas Rory is, you know, he's not the best putter. He's way down on the list. When he has it, the thing is, when those guys have a really good putting week in combination with their driving is when they win. Like that's the weeks that they win, you know. Just like Cam Smith is a really good example. A few people that are listening might hate him now because he's a live golfer, but he's still my favorite golfer because he's an Aussie and he's just crushing it. But in the Century Tournament of Champions, when he won against John Rahm, that week, I believe, was one of the weeks where he had, I think, 19 putts in one of the rounds. And he was, and his ball speed was at or faster than John Rahm's because it was the first event of the season for that year. And he was in the low to almost mid 180s for a lot of that.
I had no idea he was that fast for a while.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. I don't think he's there now. I think he had a pretty decent off season and lots of speed work.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you go back and watch replays and stuff, he was averaging up there. Now it's dropped down a little because obviously he's mid-season and traveling and all that sort of stuff. But when he has a good base of training, it's yeah, it was right up there.
It's crazy.
Cool. The next thing I wanted to go into was I'm a huge advocate for deliberate practice, and I'm sure that you've heard of this concept with you know, the motor learning that you studied. It's something that came up or was mentioned obviously in the course. How do you utilize this in practice with golfers? And you know, in the gym, we make games around it when we're learning, when we're teaching clients Olympic lifting or other bits and pieces. But do you utilize any drills which utilize deliberate practice, or do you utilize it in any of your coaching with golfers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly talking about recognizing feedback trends and then correcting for them. And it's feedback at so many different levels. So let's say you're going out there hitting balls. You're hitting 7-irons. Do you know where you're hitting it on the face? Are you hitting the toe or the heel? Because you should be correcting for that on every single swing. If you're shanking it 4 times, figure it out, right? Stop shanking it. You know,
Yeah.
so like that's like the basic part of deliberate practice is like contact awareness. And I would always say, like, whatever you're doing, do the opposite. So heel, toe. Let's say you're chunking it, try to thin it. If you're thinning it, try to chunk it. Now, if we're making a swing change and we're saying, all right, Sean said we need to load into the ground and feel like we're kind of lowering the chest and getting the pelvis going down. We're going to go work on that on the range. Now you start chunking it. So now a good drill, deliberate practice would be, we're going to do the same move, but we're also going to feel like we're swinging higher while we do it so we don't chunk it. So all these little kind of balancing acts that we always have to do. And that may also open the face, because the lower you are to the ground, maybe the less time the club face has to close. And you know, all these little adjustments. And so that's what we talk about all the time is good players. And what I train them is like, my job is to teach you ball flight, and then you take care of ball flight pretty much after about 6 months to a year. That's your department. So if I tell you we're changing biomechanics and we're changing some form at the top of your swing, great. Now you go miss right, you go fix it. You don't have me do that next time. And so that's basically their way to work deliberate practice. And I would also segment practice into, like, deliberate practice could be skill-based, meaning just refining the proximity to the hole. You might be doing your tips, putts, or drive. Or it could be mechanics, where we're not caring as much about how the ball is going and the kind of the result, but we're working on a process, making the video look better. And so there's different levels of refinement, and very much a periodized approach. So the closer we are to the season, the more I have my kids work on where they're hitting into the hole. But here we are late October. We do a ton of sessions where we don't even have the video on, and I just have them into a net and they can't see anything because I don't want them to care, right? So it's all about learning how to kind of augment the feedback for the best results you're trying to achieve long term.
Yeah, cool. I like that. I really like that sort of staggered approach, and it makes perfect sense as to why you do it, because you're obviously doing a lot of speed work and strength work in the off season when you're doing the hitting into the net without caring about the result. So you're getting them to work, I'm guessing at that point in time, on where it's hitting on the face and being able to change that. And then coming into obviously playing, we need to start caring about where that ball actually goes towards the hole, because that's how we win golf tournaments, is by getting it in the hole faster. Yeah, cool. Are there any drills that you have for, or any ways that you know, or that you can share for, you know, instead of hitting it thin, hit it fat, or instead of hitting it on the toe, hit it on the heel? Like, any drills that you have for that you can explain?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'd kind of describe it is you can always use an internal cue or an external cue. That's kind of where I did a lot of my research on. So, you know, like, let's say you are hitting the heel. Could be because your pelvis is moving towards the ball and you're not getting into your posterior chain on your lead leg, right? You're not getting your left heel on the ground, so you're moving closer to the ball. So you can solve it different ways. But I would almost always go with the external cue first, unless the video told me that there's a big problem there. You know, so that's where, like, the coach is going to decide what's the cue based on, you know, essentially the flaw you might have, if that makes some sense. But oftentimes, like, the good rule of thumb is go external cue first, and then internal might be the next way to approach it.
Okay, cool. And what's an example of an external cue versus internal cue, just for people listening?
Sure. External is just thinking about the club or the ball, or the environment. And people will tend to have much better results thinking external cue than internal cue. But a big part of that could be the timing. So you might not have the exact same, what we call motor equivalence with the same cue. So if I said, Sean, just hit the ball off the toe, you might still be moving your pelvis towards the ball. You might just be raising your hands out at impact and jumping. And so that would be an inferior way. It's not motor equivalence. It's not solving the problem the same way. And so that's the coach's job. Now, the closer we get to competition, the more often you're going to go simple external cue to make sure that you don't shank it under the gun, right?
Yeah.
But in the winter, I'm going to solve it with more internal cues more likely, and I'm going to make sure that your butt's moving back into the wall and you're creating some space. So I care more about biomechanics, but the problem of internal cues under the gun is that they're almost a dual task. Meaning, if you got to think about your butt getting back and you got to hit the ball off the toe, you're asking a lot, especially of an amateur, right? And we know probably there's lots of evidence that pros can think about one or two things, but that state of kind of external focus where you're just thinking about the target and the shot you're trying to hit and the kind of the curve of the ball, that's probably the best way to play competitive golf. Yeah.
It's that point that you brought up there. That's something I want to go a little further into in a sec. But when you're saying there that pros can think about a couple of things, give me an example of that versus an amateur. Like why can they focus on a couple of things? Like, I'm guessing it's more towards their awareness of their body, and they've done so many more repetitions, so they're just more aware of where they are in space. But can you talk a bit more about that?
Well, pros have reached a state of almost automaticity, right? So they could literally, like a lot of us can chew gum and walk, right? We've been walking since we were 2. We can walk and we can chew gum and we could carry on a conversation, right? So all of us have automaticity in some parts of our lives. Pros have automaticity while they're playing golf. So they could be singing a song in their head, they could be thinking about their taxes, and they can still hit it in the middle of the face. The average amateur needs to probably think about what they're trying to do just to make contact, right? And if you load them with multiple thoughts, pretty soon that kind of, my favorite analogy is it's like a bucket. We have a bucket of attention. And for the pro, all those skills that they've worked on over years are like, putting things in the bucket. They're like grains of sand. It's all a bedrock underneath. And really what they're dealing with is the environment and the situation and maybe the difficulty of the shot in front of them. But they can handle all that. For the average amateur, as soon as you put them in a tournament and they got to think about 3 things, which are maybe a couple bad swing thoughts, and they got to think about the party that's watching them, they can't do it, right? So they fall apart because it's too much to handle for them. So they're not high enough in terms of the level of automaticity. And that goes right into our training is how do we train people with high demands and high challenges so that when we're out on the course, we can simplify and actually handle the extra challenge of competition. Because competition in itself is one level higher than practice. So we need to practice at a high level and then compete with low amounts of care and low amounts of attention for everything but the essential things. Make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I was very fortunate at school. The school that I went to is very uncommon in Australia to have a school like I had, which was a sports specialization in volleyball. Because volleyball is it's not a massive sport in Australia, but my coach for my school was also he was also like a regional and a state coach, and one of the things he used to have us do was we'd run suicide sprints and all different stuff, different outside hitting, inside hitting, setting drills, all this stuff. And we'd wear ankle weights the whole time, and we'd have the net set at the normal height. And then come game time, I felt like I could jump out of my shoes. And it's part of the reason why I have a very good vertical leap still, in my 30s now, mid-30s, I can, still like 30 inches, or 28 to 30 inches. Like it's higher than most people. Like I can, touch both hands on the rim of a basketball hoop at 6'1", so it's a pretty good vertical leap. And I put it down to that, and also just continuing with different speed training. But one of the things he said, which you were just saying there, which just resonated massively, was the train hard, play easy. Like
Yeah.
put yourself into really, really awkward, hard situations that are tougher than what you're going to experience on the course. And obviously then when you get to the course, it feels like it's a comfortable or a common environment that you're always in. And you don't really succumb to the pressure as much. And I think Tiger is the person who comes to mind with that, you know. I've seen multiple videos of him lining up for a shot, stopping mid-swing because something happens, or you know, he'll stand up, he'll go to address the ball, and as he walks up there, like some cameras go off or whatever, and he stops, he walks behind the ball again, resets, does his visualization or whatever he does, and then goes and hits the ball again. And I think it's because his dad was a real jerk when he was growing up, and would, you know,
Right.
move the keys in the pocket and just yell at him and make all sounds and whatnot. But it did develop that really good, clear focus, which like was harder than potentially what he had to deal with and face on the PGA Tour. Plus, he's, you know, very well conditioned to that these days, so he's gotten a lot better with it. Now,
Yeah. Let me bring up this point too. The counterpoint is how many amateurs go out and try to hit 7-irons off a perfect lie at the exact same target, thinking they're golfing, right?
yeah,
And so, like, that is great stuff to work on maybe in the winter in a development stage when you're focusing on mechanics. You know, and I always train towards, am I training skill or am I changing mechanics? But, you know, block practice is for mechanics, variable practice and contextual interference is for more skill training and preparing for competition. So many amateurs have it wrong. They're chasing a practice effect instead of learning when they're at the range.
yeah. And I see it regularly. I think a really common example is like if you're like just one of the more regular, the more recent practice rounds that I had, I went around and I was like putting plugged lies in the bunker, and
Yeah.
like, you know, putting my foot on the ball and settling it down into the rough and chipping it and hitting bunker shots. And one of the guys was like, "Why are you doing that? You're just not even going to hit it close." And I'm like, "Because this is what's going to happen in a round. Like if
Yeah.
it's on an uphill lie in a bunker and I'm on the face and uphill, I know I can put it within 6 or 8 feet, like, you know, 6 to 8 times out of 10. Like I'm going to be able to do that. I might hole 1 out of 30, you know.
Right.
It's a very easy shot for me. So I'm like challenging myself with that so that it's something that's really uncommon. You know, not always having the ball. In Australia recently, we've had a lot of, in Sydney in particular, we've had a lot of rain. So a lot of the courses are playing preferred lies through the course because you lose your ball. It'll get plugged in the rough, like in deep rough, it'll plug and it's just gone.
Wow.
So yeah, like yeah, courses have been closed for months and months on end, like on and off. So, but yeah, everyone's been playing with preferred lies, and so they're not getting used to hitting mud balls, and they're not getting used to hitting out of, you know, slightly buried, you know, as long as it's not embedded, but like slightly sitting down in the rough, with a bit of rainfall on top of the ball, pushing it down further. But people aren't hitting these; they're picking it up, cleaning it, and doing that. And if I'm in a comp, like or a tournament, of course I'm going to do that because everyone's doing that, and it's, you know, to your advantage, and you're going to score better. But in practice, like every second or third shot, I won't do that, so that I get to see what the ball is going to do. So I know what's going to happen if I'm playing at that in a tournament, you know. And I think it just better prepares people. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for bringing that one up. That was cool. One of the things that you said there was whether it's or what I took away from it was when you were talking about like hip rotation and contact with the ball and stuff. I was thinking whether it's a physical or a technical limitation, and I know what I do to figure out with a golfer whether it's a physical or a technical limitation that they have. But what are some of the things that you look for in golfers when you're working with them on their swing or whatever it might be, to know whether it's a physical or a technical problem that they're working on, and then like how to go about addressing that?
Yeah, you know, I'm TPI. I'm sure you are too, and so TPI would say, well, screen it and find out. But
Assess, don't guess. Yeah.
yeah, it's a really good way to kind of get to the bottom of it. But I'm going to be probably a little bit off the TPI script here, and I'll just say I want to see if they can do it without a ball. So in 5 minutes, can I train them to do the move properly without a ball? Because if I can do that, it's clearly a motor learning thing. And if it's a lot of times, like I can see from a mile away, okay, these hips are pretty tight. We got an issue right here with the hip rotation. But I do want to see if I can work around that. And if I can't, then I'm going to definitely send them to you. If I can, we're just going to talk about how do we change the pattern and change how we practice, which would be a lot of foam balls probably, and just change the pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Because I think the most common sort of frustration I get with golfers who don't go and work with a TPI pro, and it might be a little more geared towards frustration towards like all the old school sort of golf instructors who, I use this example all the time. They have a video of Adam Scott, and then they have a video of you swinging, and they go, Adam Scott looks really good, you look terrible. You need to move more like Adam Scott. But what they're missing there is like, can that person actually move and perform all of the TPI screen tests really well like Adam Scott? Because then we can probably get them to reach the positions in the swing that Adam Scott is reaching. And I think that a lot of people would be much better served if they, first and foremost, like got their body looked at for one, or even if you didn't have your body looked at, just go and do some stuff in the gym or some mobility work to actually get it moving better. And if you're always striving to move it better, then whatever swing changes you want to make in the future are going to come much easier because you're more coordinated, you've got better motor learning. It doesn't matter if you're just practicing the golf swing all the time or whether you're doing different movements in the gym. It's all motor learning and coordination and the body learning to fire in different ways, right?
Oh, yeah, I would agree.
And by doing that is, teaching someone to juggle can make them hit a golf ball better because they're starting to use their hands and eyes better, and they can see and catch and that sort of thing, and an external object, and then go and put them in front of a golf ball, and you'll probably find that they can hit it better because they're just more coordinated.
When I work with a TPI trained fitness trainer, and I know somebody's been with them for 6 months or a year, there's no doubt they have a better chance to learn because they can move the body. So I see that every day. So that's why I'm always encouraging them to go see people like you, because I know they can do what I want way better. Huge advantage. Yeah. Yeah,
100%. It's one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately, just because I've had a lot of clients who've come in for screenings or done screenings online, and has been early extension in the swing. And it can be caused by many different things. And for most golfers, it's because they don't have a very good pelvic rotation. It sort of limits their rotation. So they have to get speed from the ground by driving into it and their hips forward. So sort of like more of a jump than a rotating jump, if you want to describe it that way. And for me as a kid, and again, this is going back to volleyball, and I played basketball as well, because I was very good at jumping and it was a very efficient motor pattern for me to have that straight up and down jump. I developed a massive early extension in my swing, and it's been something that I've tried to remove over the years because I'm obviously, I'm 35 now. I'm significantly bigger and stronger than what I was when I was, playing volleyball as a teenager. So I can generate power in a different way, in a more efficient way than, driving my hips towards the ball. What's like for someone in this boat, because everyone's seen all the content that I've been putting out recently about it, what's a start point for you in terms of, if they've worked with me for a little while, we've got their hips moving better. We've sort of taught them what the problem is. Like, instead of pushing your hips towards the ball, we want to rotate them around instead of them extending forwards. What are some like drills that they can do in a practice setting or on the course or whatever to actually practice not early extending? Because I know you've got some really good ones on your Instagram.
It's honestly probably the hardest swing fault to solve because, to your point, early extending is really powerful. And so if you find somebody that's early extending and they get a ton of power from that move, I'll be honest, it's really hard to reclaim that power in another way because you've got to find some rotational and you've got to find some linear to replace it. And oftentimes, like, the biggest predictor of power of any of the TPI tests is a vertical jump. So that's how so many people are trained to hammer it. So how do you do it? My favorite way to do it is I do freezers. So I get people to the top of the backswing, and I make sure the club is in a very shallow position. And then I have them essentially like trigger with the lead heel. So I'm going to have them lift their heel, hammer the heel down to trigger their downswing. So that gets them rotating and some linear force right away. And then I have them swing knee height. So they're swinging way above the golf ball. And then we look on video, and I'm going to draw a plane line, and I'm going to say, all right, your spine is at 78 degrees. I need that at 45 degrees. And we keep doing that until they get that feel of spine 45 degrees at impact. but we're swinging knee height the whole time. So we're training the arms to go around, because so much of the dysfunction of early extension is a steep plane. And once you take that element out of it and you prove to people that you can get them to a proper looking impact without a ball, then you've proven now it's a transfer issue. It's no longer a physical mobility issue. They can do it.
Yeah, cool. I love that one. And you've got some videos on your Instagram of that drill, I'm guessing too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Learn to swing above the ball, and the feeling of essentially tilting your torso down. It's, think of it like a cylinder. You got to learn to tilt that thing down, because if we try to stay in the same place, we're going to early extend. But if you can learn to tilt it down and get your butt back, you got a chance. But you also have to swing high, because you're going to hit it into the ground, because you always get steeper every time you move down. Right?
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks for that. I guess the next thing, or the next part that I wanted to go into, excuse me, was just talking a little bit more about the Rypstick and just sort of the training protocols and whatnot that you have around that. Did you want to describe like your level ones, etc., like that, and start going into like the best practices for using them, and maybe some of the reasons why you've come up with that training protocol in terms of studies and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, we start out with the understanding that a lot of golfers have similar swing flaws, and so our level one training is meant to solve a lot of those. So number one is if you swing and on your knees, and if you swing on your knees and don't hit the ground, you're working on getting your arms to work around your body. So we're already fighting early extension and essentially some steepness, which affects probably 85% of golfers are steep, right? So we start out on the knees, and the next one we do is a freezer. So we go to the top of the swing and then step towards the target and then swing from there, which is always a good one to, again, learn how to do it from the top down. I teach a lot from the whole idea of, if I can teach somebody the downswing, which is the dynamic hard part first, I can slap a backswing on, piece of cake. But you think about that transition in the golf swing, it takes whatever, 0.2 seconds. It's so hard to get that right. So that's why we do so many freezers, to trigger the downswing and make the downswing look awesome. And so I teach so much that way. It's built right into Rypstick. And then the last one is just lifting the lead heel. So you're lifting your heel off the ground and hammering it down. And Sean, as you know, probably of the golfers that have won 6 majors, I think Tiger's the only one that kept his left heel on the ground. So
yeah, wow.
You need to be lifting your left heel if you want to win a major. It definitely tends to help, especially if you're an amateur, and you don't have.
Maybe that's been my problem.
There you go.
Maybe that's been my problem all along.
So we like to utilize that, especially with driver. I don't recommend it on a sand wedge, but when you're trying to rip a driver, lift that heel and get some good power with your legs.
Yeah, cool. And obviously that will stop a lot of slide as well, right?
Yeah, it does, right? It replaces, because most people slide too much and jump too much, and we're trying to get more rotation for most golfers, right? And then everything we do is bilateral, meaning you swing righty and lefty. And there's some great science on, if you learn to go fast left-handed, it actually teaches you to decelerate, which is so key for linking the power and going from one segment to the other. So somebody that can swing fast left-handed has a great chance to stabilize their pelvis, let that energy go to the upper body, the torso, and then to the arms more efficiently. So there's a great study on, one time they did just had people train left-handed, and their right-handed swings got faster. So it's so crazy, but bilateral swinging is really important.
Yeah, I found it when I first, obviously the first tool that I used was the speed sticks, and I found that when I first started swinging, it was so uncoordinated when I went lefty. Obviously, I'm right-handed, but I think my first ever swings with the speed sticks were around with the lightest one or the least weight. If you to do it with the Rypstick, it was around 112 to 115, and left-handed it was 85. It was significantly less. Now, I literally haven't done anything except for the level 1 speed stick protocol, which is obviously all the step changes and right-handed, left-handed, all that sort of stuff. But in doing that, I've gone from 115-ish. I think the max I've hit is 144 right-handed with the light stick. Yeah, and then which is the less than what a driver is, and then the fastest I've gone lefty is 132 miles an hour. So
that's amazing.
yeah, just practicing that has helped me become so much more coordinated. And I also feel that there's, and I don't know what the research says about this. I think this is just me tying two things together. But the deceleration aspect is obviously also really good for injury prevention, because if we can't slow down and we are rotating so fast, and we're only teaching ourselves to rotate so fast without slowing down, or building the muscles that are antagonist to that, then obviously we're going to start to, twist our spine out of its place. It's not going to be ideal. So is there any research around that, around the deceleration preventing injuries, or is that sort of, are we too early days in speed training for that to be out?
I mean, I bet the research is there in terms of any sort of body imbalance is going to have greater risk of injury, right? I mean, how many golfers come in with a higher left shoulder, right? So yeah. I would think swinging right-handed all the time, there's much higher risk of injuries, right? In my era, it was people carrying golf bags on one side instead of two, junior golfers, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be balanced, and swinging righty and lefty helps a ton for sure. I don't know directly about, the deceleration and measuring that, but I'm sure, there's no doubt that makes a difference.
Yeah. And are there any, excuse me, I think I swallowed a fly just before. It's not doing me any good. Is there any, I know you mentioned before that you've done a lot of research. Is there any particular research that you wanted to share with us? Because I know you mentioned before that you wanted to share a particular thing. Was there any that sort of stands out, or you think is super relevant to the chat we're having now?
So I think the big thing is we can predict power pretty well. And we've got a calculator on our website where you can go and put in your numbers for a vertical jump and the chest pass and the overhead pass. And it'll predict very accurately how fast you should be swinging. So that's a cool thing to know. And just understand that the gains you get are very easily predicted. And they are certainly, hard won, meaning you have to go do the work. But it's not a crazy amount of work. And if you support it with some good fitness, it's really safe. So I would say, like, if you've never tried it, go try it. If you've done it before and you gave it up, like, give it a go again, get after it, and keep it up. It's almost like, you probably know it's not as hard to get somebody to go do a treadmill for a couple of weeks and just go walk and read a book, right? But if you can get yourself to go do 15 minutes, 3 days a week for speed training, for Rypstick speed training, you're going to see great benefits to your game. And it's way more efficient in terms of gaining some speed versus hitting balls an extra couple hours a week for most golfers. So it's well worth it.
Yeah, 100%. It's I don't know. We're still sort of fighting that battle of people like, if I hit it further, it's going to be off track and blah blah blah. But if they just read Mike Brody's book, they would, that sort of quashes that objection really. But some people are like, why do I need to be swinging faster? What does it matter if I can swing it faster? And obviously, it just increases our scoring potential. And the other thing as well is, it's not so that you can hit it further. Having the potential to hit it further doesn't mean you have to hit it further. I mean, you can still hit your 3-iron off the tee if you feel comfortable hitting it like that. Or, I still take iron off the tee on some par 4s because I'm still hitting a wedge in, and it means that I don't hit it into the water, 40 meters short of the green, or, 60 yards short of the green. So, obviously, like having the distance there at your disposal is a really powerful tool, and can be one that decreases shots off your handicap significantly, versus not having the potential to do that, because then you're having to lay up and you're having to hit short and you're having to hit 3 shots onto par 5s and not having the potential to go on to par 5s in 2 and that sort of thing. Do you have any phrases or things that sort of help people overcome that objection in their mind if they're sitting on the fence about speed training?
Yeah, I would just say, like, we're built as a company that we want you to hit it farther, but not more crooked. So we do a free swing evaluation for anybody that purchases, and I'll give you a couple of individual tips during that can help, because generally, like, people don't lose that much accuracy, but if you can maybe solve 1 or 2 swing flaws, if you have a bias and you do it while you're training, now you're actually improving your swing while you're getting faster. which, generally, like a lot of people say, well, the speed trainer, don't think about where your swing is. I don't agree. Like, make your swing better and swing faster at the same time. And I think that's where you can basically get rid of that concern. You can just get better. You can flatten your wrists. You might lose a tiny bit of essentially like wrist cock at the top, a little less radial deviation, but you're going to shallow your plane and you're going to get your hips to move and you're going to hit it straighter and a little farther. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, it's also quite funny to to see the tour stats as well. Like, some of the longer hitters are also the straightest hitters too.
Mm-hmm.
Rory was up there for a while in terms of percentage on fairway and whatnot. I think JT was up there too, but I can't speak to the stats exactly as they are now or this year. But just because you are long doesn't always mean that it's going to be wide. There is potential for it to be pretty wide, because obviously the further you hit it, 1 degree off is going to be, 30 yards right or 50 or whatever. But yeah, it generally doesn't work like that. It's not linear in that respect. Doesn't mean you're going to miss fairways.
Agreed. Yeah, I think Brody's book mentioned that actually some of the longer hitters by percentage of miss are actually better.
Yeah, and if you're combining it with Scott Fawcett is the Decade Golf, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're combining it with him and he's in this Decade Golf protocols or whatever you want to call them, he's getting you to map out what's your biggest miss left and your biggest miss right, and you're actually Google mapping it on courses that you're going to play in the future, and figuring out your target lines and knowing that even if you do hit your worst miss, you're still going to be within the fairway and not in hitting it OB or into the water or something like that. So using a combination of these things is obviously going to help. But I think the thing that gets into most golfers' heads that stops them is their ego, like just wanting to hit it further than mates, and just doing things the way that they've always been done. Just because like Arnold Palmer or Hogan or whoever the old Seve or whoever these older players are, if some of them actually had access to the technology and the learnings and the studies that we have now, I think they would actually be significantly better than what they were, like even, more dominant in their time if they had access to this data and information.
100%. I think Tiger would have won a lot more if Butch had said, just rip it, and Tiger would have tried for a little more speed, because I think Tiger was working control pretty hard at certain points, It could have been really different for a lot of golfers, right?
Yeah, crazy to think that he could have won more. 82 is not enough.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your night, because I know it's getting late over there where you are. But where's some places that people can find your work? Get their hands on a Rypstick, all that sort of stuff. Did you want to share where people can go?
Yeah. Just go to rypstick.com. You can find us on social media as well. And we, like I say, with any purchase, I'll do a free swing evaluation and give you a couple of tips. Me personally, I do them all. So, I think for most people, like, we pretty much guarantee 20 yards in 3 months of work. So just put in some work. It's a great Christmas gift as well. If you got somebody in your life that needs a few more yards, and we all do. So think about that, and appreciate all your help, Sean, in promoting it a little bit. It's awesome.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll put up when you say Rypstick, it's RYP stick.
Yes.
Just so that people know. And I'll obviously put up links to it in the show notes and things like that. And then I'm also an affiliate for you as well. So I'll share up the promo code and whatnot there so that people can jump on and get a small discount. And I'm assuming I get some sort of a kickback for that. So just a disclaimer, I don't know what it is. I just like the product, so I don't really care what the kickback is, to be honest. I just want it to be used by a lot of my clients to get better, because I know it's a really good tool that I personally use. So cool, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your knowledge. And we'll definitely have to get you back on in the future if more questions come up, and we get some questions come up from clients and also some listeners of the podcast. And we can hit those up too.
That sounds awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Sean. Appreciate it.
Cool. No worries.